For centuries, Japan remained isolated from the world, safeguarding its unique characteristics and staying secluded due to its distinct geography, language, and culture. This strict anti-immigration approach made it an exception among prosperous countries, with very few foreigners permanently living within its borders. On the other hand, you might be surprised to learn that Japan is one of the most indebted countries in the world, despite being the fourth largest economy, trailing only behind the United States, China, and Germany. Its public debt amounts to 250% of its GDP, which is the value of all goods and services produced by the country in a period. However, times are changing. For the first time in history, Japan is gradually opening its borders to foreigners. This movement has been quietly unfolding in recent years, with an increasing number of immigrants arriving in the country, reaching record levels. These changes are happening swiftly, leading us to question Japan's closed stance and what it will mean for its future. In Japan, concerns don't stop there. They face a serious challenge with the birth rate, and that's just the beginning. With a low birth rate and a high life expectancy, the country is rapidly becoming a true champion of aging. The young workforce is increasingly busy taking care of the older generations, which means a growing shortage of people contributing to the economy. But how has the change in immigration policy affected Japan? What challenges does Japan currently face regarding its population? And finally, could Japan's public debt bankrupt the country? Well, stick with me in this video, and you'll understand everything. You know the drill, right? Get your popcorn ready, hit the like button, and let's dive in. It all began around the 1600s, a period when the globe was going through its early stages of globalization. While European states expanded their colonial empires and increased influence in Asia, Japan, concerned about its culture and security, made an extraordinary decision. In 1633, it instituted the policy known as Sakoku, which remained in effect for over 2 centuries. Under this policy, any interactions with Western nations were prohibited, and even relations with neighboring countries like China and Korea were strictly limited. All foreigners were expelled and prohibited from entering, while Japanese citizens faced severe restrictions on leaving the country and could not return. Thus, Japan voluntarily plunged into near-total isolation, longer and more rigorous than any other nation in modern history. For over 2 centuries, while the rest of the world faced conflicts and colonization, Japan enjoyed stability, prosperity, and peace. Free from wars and foreign influences, the Japanese devoted themselves to art and pleasure, creating an image of the country as a floating world, separated from conflict and poverty, where time flowed at a more leisurely pace. Although the Sakoku policy has long been ended, many Japanese scholars believe its impact persists to this day. Now, with ongoing changes, Japan finds itself at a new chapter in its history, reassessing its traditions and opening the doors to a more diverse and interconnected future with the world. During a long period of isolation, Japan remained uniquely preserved, with a culture and social norms so distinct that it made it difficult for foreigners to understand and adapt to Japanese society. Even after opening up to global politics and trade, the country maintained its isolation in some aspects. Japan has always strived to protect its culture, which includes having one of the strictest immigration policies since World War II. Obtaining asylum, citizenship, or long-term residency in Japan has been nearly impossible, and acquiring a long-term work visa has been extremely difficult, resulting in a very low number of foreigners, including skilled workers. In summary, due to historical reasons, Japanese society is objectively challenging for foreigners to fully integrate into, and the country has actively kept the number of foreigners as low as possible. This has led Japan to have one of the lowest percentages of foreign-born population among developed countries, while most wealthy nations became more diversified and dependent on immigration. However, it seems that this era has come to an end. In recent decades, resistance to immigration, which was once seen as an advantage, has become problematic. After the Japanese economic miracle and after World War II, the country experienced incredible economic development. However, this economic growth was accompanied by a massive decline in the fertility rate, resulting in a declining population. The Japanese economy has been stagnant for a long time, and the demographic crisis has made things worse. With a shrinking population, achieving economic growth becomes very difficult due to the decrease in the number of workers and consumers. Additionally, the population is aging, which means there will be more elderly people economically dependent on state pensions, without a sufficient number of economically active people to support them. Over the next 50 years, there are predictions that Japan will lose 1/3 of its population, which will have devastating effects on its economy. Japan is not the only country facing this problem. No developed and wealthy country, whether in Europe or Asia, has fertility rates high enough to sustain their populations. Thus, immigration has become an economic necessity for these nations. It is essential to maintain population growth, the number of workers, and to boost economies. Without immigration, economic growth would be much more difficult to achieve. But here's the problem for Japan: an aging population that is rapidly growing, without the help of immigration to alleviate these problems. This situation makes the demographic crisis and Japan's economic problems even more complicated to solve. However, in recent years, the country has quietly changed its immigration policy, adopting measures that go in the opposite direction. Since 2013, Japan has begun to receive hundreds of thousands of immigrants, and in recent years, it has implemented a historic immigration reform, allowing highly skilled foreign workers to reside in the country indefinitely. As a result, the number of foreign workers in Japan has been increasing annually. This change has rapidly transformed the country's reality, once seen as homogeneous and closed. Currently, major cities like Tokyo are becoming increasingly diverse and multicultural. Since the 1990s, the number of foreigners living in Japan has tripled, reaching 3 million by the end of 2022, and this number continues to grow. The government expects that by 2070, at least 10% of Japan's population will be composed of immigrants. Although this change is necessary to address the country's problems, it will inevitably bring permanent transformations to Japan. Surprisingly, unlike what happened in some Western countries, there has been no populist movement against the arrival of immigrants in Japan. Most Japanese people see this change as positive, understanding the importance of immigrants in dealing with the challenges the country faces. As Japan becomes increasingly cosmopolitan and diverse, these changes will be even more evident, altering the face of the country similar to what has happened in Europe in recent decades. Another challenge facing Japan is its massive public debt. When we talk about public debt, we refer to the money a country owes to private investors or other nations. This money is used to finance the public deficit, which occurs when a country spends more than it collects. Debt can be incurred domestically or internationally. To give you an idea, other countries also have significant debts that exceed 100% of GDP, such as the United States, Italy, Spain, France, and Sudan. In the case of Latin American countries, public debt is generally lower. The only case that exceeds the 100% threshold is Venezuela's. In Brazil, the debt reached 85% of GDP, with a tendency to increase in the coming years. On the other hand, Japan is facing an impressive debt of $12 trillion owed to its creditors. This amount, although not seemingly enormous in absolute terms, is more than twice the value of the country's entire economic output. The advantage is that much of this debt is in government bonds with extremely low interest rates. Still, these interest payments have a serious impact on Japan's long-term economic growth. Unfortunately, the Japanese economy finds itself in a difficult and challenging situation. The country cannot simply solve the problem by taking out more loans. Additionally, its workers are becoming less productive as they age, and economic sectors that were once stable are now being overtaken by the new Asian economies in the bloc. Japan's stagnation may be something more significant than just an object of study in national productive economies analyses. In this context, Japan's fate may be an increasingly likely outcome for a stagnant economy. Another country sunk in debt is Greece, which is now appearing on your screen. As always, thank you very much for watching.